Grant was having a quiet morning. He had made his tea, fed the old cat that lived under his porch, and was sitting on his back step watching the fog settle over the fields. It was the kind of morning that asked nothing of anyone. Grant liked those mornings. He had not always had them. The cat heard it first. She lifted her head, flattened her ears, and disappeared under the porch without a sound. Grant watched her go. Then he heard it too. A heavy dragging sound. Slow. Uneven. Like something very large trying very hard not to fall. He set his tea down. The people of Millford were already moving by the time the two drakes reached the edge of town. Someone had spotted them from the mill road and the word had spread fast. Doors slammed. Windows shut. A woman grabbed her child off the front steps and ran inside without looking back. Two men near the grain store dropped everything and cut across the field. Nobody stayed. Nobody wanted to. The drakes did not seem to notice or care. They moved slowly down the main road, side by side. One was larger, dark-scaled, with a long neck held low to the ground. The other was smaller and leaning badly to one side, its left wing dragging in the dirt. Both of them were hurt. Anyone who looked closely could see that. Deep cuts ran across their sides. One had a broken scale plate near its shoulder that had turned dark with dried blood. They were not walking like hunters. They were walking like something that had fought hard and barely made it out. They passed the grain store. They passed the well. They passed the schoolhouse with its shuttered windows. They moved through the whole of Millford without stopping, without turning, without paying any attention to the empty road around them. It was as if they were looking for something specific. As if they already knew where they were going. They stopped at the far end of town. Grant's house sat alone on a dirt path past the last fence. It was small and plain. A single window faced the road. The front step was worn smooth. There was no sign above the door, no marker, nothing that made it different from any other forgotten house on any other forgotten road. But the two drakes stopped in front of it and did not move. Grant heard them from the back. He had already come around the side of the house by the time the larger drake turned its head toward him. He walked slowly, hands open at his sides, and he looked at them the way a man looks at something he has seen before and is not surprised to see again. He did not speak right away. He looked at the wounds first. The larger drake had 3 deep cuts along its right flank. Old enough to have stopped bleeding, but not old enough to have started healing. The smaller one had the dragging wing and something wrong with its back leg. It was putting no weight on it at all. Grant crouched down and looked at the leg from a few feet away. The drake did not pull back. He stood up. "Come around the back," he said. He said it simply, the way a man tells a neighbor to come inside out of the rain. Then he turned and walked back around the side of the house. He did not look behind him to see if they were following. They followed. The back of Grant's house was different from the front. There was a wide flat area of packed earth, a long low shed against the back fence, and a covered space between the shed and the house where the light was good and the wind did not reach. It was the kind of space that was built with purpose. The kind of space meant for work. Grant opened the shed without hurrying. He pulled out a heavy canvas sheet and spread it on the ground under the covered space. He went back inside the shed and came out with a wooden crate, which he set down and opened. Inside were clean cloth strips, sealed jars, a flat-bladed tool, 2 kinds of powder, a needle and heavy thread, and a small pair of metal tongs. He laid each item out in a straight line on top of the crate. The drakes had settled onto the canvas without being asked. Grant looked at them both again. He started with the smaller one because the wing and the leg were the worst problems. He moved slowly, spoke softly each time he reached toward the animal, and kept his hand steady. He did not rush. He did not look nervous. He worked the way a man works when he has done something many times and stopped being afraid of it long ago. The larger drake watched him the whole time. Not the way an animal watches something unfamiliar. Not with fear or warning. It watched him the way a person watches someone they came a long way to find, making sure the person is exactly who they were told he would be. Grant did not look up. He kept working. By midday the worst of it was cleaned and closed. He had said very little. Just quiet words here and there, explaining what he was doing before he did it. The drakes had not made a sound throughout. No growling. No flinching. They had been still and patient, as if they understood every word he said. Grant sat back on the old stool he had brought out from the shed. He looked at both drakes for a moment. Then he went inside and came back with 2 large pieces of salted meat from the cold box. He set one in front of each of them and went back to his stool. He picked up his tea, which had long gone cold, and drank it anyway. The cat was watching from the porch again. She had not come any closer. But she had come back out. That, Grant thought, was something. The sun went down and Grant kept working. He had brought out 2 oil lamps from inside the house and hung them from the low beam above the covered space. The light was warm and steady. It pushed back the dark just enough. Grant worked inside that small circle of light while the rest of Millford went quiet around him. The neighbors had not gone quietly. Old Pren from the house across the path had come by just before sunset. He stood at the back fence with his arms crossed and said nothing for a long moment. Then he said that Grant had lost his mind. Grant did not argue. He said the drakes were hurt and that hurt things needed help. Pren told him the whole town was uneasy and that people were talking. Grant said people were always talking. Pren left. 2 other neighbors came by after dark, standing at the fence and speaking in low voices. Grant heard them but did not stop working. After a while they left too. The drakes noticed the neighbors. They tracked each one with calm eyes and then looked away, unbothered. That seemed to unsettle people more than anything else. Grant started on rail properly when the light was good. He had given her the canvas on the left side because it was closer to the shed and easier to reach. She was the larger of the 2. Dark-scaled, with a long jaw and a neck that she kept low and still while he worked. Her 3 flank wounds were the deepest things Grant had treated in a long time. He cleaned each one carefully, pressing clean cloth to the edges and working out the dirt and dried matter with slow, patient movements. He talked while he worked. Not to fill the silence. He talked because it helped both of them. This one is the deepest, he said, looking at the middle cut. I am going to close it in 2 steps. First layer, then second. It will hold better that way. Rail did not move. He threaded the heavy needle and started. His hands did not shake. His breathing was slow. He had stitched wounds in worse places than this, in worse light, with less to work with. He did not think about that. He just worked. The broken scale plate near her shoulder was a different problem. He could not fix the plate itself. What he could do was clean beneath it, seal the raw skin underneath, and wrap the area so nothing rubbed against it while it began to heal. He explained that too, step by step, before he touched anything. Rael turned her head slightly and looked at him while he spoke. Just looked. Still and focused, the way a person looks when they are paying close attention to every word. Grant noticed. He did not say anything about it. He just kept working. He moved to the smaller drake after midnight. The wing joint was the hardest part. It was not broken cleanly. Something had been wrenched badly, pulled in a direction it was not meant to go. Grant ran his hands along the joint slowly, feeling the shape of it, checking where the swelling was worst. The smaller drake made a low sound. Not a growl. Something more tired than that. I know, Grant said. I am not going to force it. I am just looking. He decided not to try to reset anything that night. The swelling needed to come down first. He packed the joint with a cold compress made from cloth soaked in water and one of the powders from the crate. He wrapped it firmly but not tight. Then he did the leg. The leg was bruised deep but nothing was broken. He wrapped that too, working from the bottom up, and told the smaller drake it would carry weight again in a few days. The smaller drake lowered its head onto the canvas and closed its eyes. Grant sat back for a moment and looked at both of them. Both were breathing evenly. Both were still. The worst of it was done. He rolled his shoulders, picked up the lamp, and went to the shed to clean his tools. When he came back out, Rael was watching him. She had turned her head to follow him from the shed to the covered space and back again. Her eyes caught the lamp light and held it. Grant set the lamp down on the crate and looked back at her. There was something in those eyes that did not belong to an animal. He had seen animals all his life. He knew how they looked at things. This was not that. He did not say anything. He pulled the stool close and sat down. By the time the sky started to pale at the edges, both drakes were resting steadily. Their breathing had evened out hours ago. The smaller one had not woken since Grant finished the leg. Rael had stayed awake most of the night but her eyes were half closed now, heavy and slow. Grant went inside and put the kettle on. He came back out with 2 cups out of habit, realized what he had done, and set the second cup on the crate without thinking much about it. He sat on the stool and held his own cup with both hands and watched the sky turn from black to gray to a thin pale blue. The cat came and sat beside his feet. A few birds started up somewhere past the fence. Millford was still quiet. It would not stay that way. People would come by again in the morning with more words and more worry. Grant knew that. He was not concerned about it. The drakes were stable. Their wounds were clean. That was what mattered. He drank his tea. Rael opened one eye and looked at him. Grant looked back. Neither of them looked away for a long time. The second day was quieter than the first. Grant had expected more neighbors. A few came in the morning, looked over the fence, and left without saying much. Old Pren did not come back. The town was still uneasy but it had settled into a watchful kind of quiet, the sort that means people have decided to wait and see rather than act. Grant was fine with that. He checked the drakes early. The smaller one was doing better. It had eaten again and was putting a little weight on the wrapped leg when it shifted position. The wing joint was still swollen but the heat had come down through the night. Grant changed the compress and rewrapped it. The smaller drake watched him work with calm, tired eyes. Rael had not slept much. She was sitting upright when Grant came out in the morning, and she was still sitting upright now, in the middle of the afternoon, watching him move between the shed and the covered space. She had eaten everything he put in front of her. She had let him check her wounds without pulling back. But she had not rested. She was thinking about something. Grant could see it in the way she held herself, still and focused, like a person working up to saying something difficult. He pulled the stool close and sat down with his tea. He had just taken the first sip when Rael spoke. "You are in our records." Grant did not spill the tea. He did not move back. He looked at her steadily and set the cup down on the crate beside him, slowly, the way a man sets something down when he wants his hands to be free and his mind to be clear. "Is that so?" he said. "Not as a healer," Rael said. Her voice was low and even. The words came carefully, like someone speaking a language they knew well but did not use often. "Not as a medic. The record is older than that. The name in it is not the name you use now." Grant was quiet. "We have kept records for a long time," Rael continued. "Longer than most humans know. We record the ones who matter. The ones who crossed into our territory and were not afraid. The ones who learned our language and did not use it as a weapon. The ones who stood between their own kind and ours when it would have been easier to step aside." She paused. "There are not many names in that record. Yours is one of them. The smaller drake had opened its eyes and was listening. Grant looked at his cup for a moment. Then he looked back at Rael. What do you want to know? He said. Why you are here, she said. In this small place. Alone. Doing nothing. She said the last word without harshness, but plainly, the way someone states a fact that puzzles them. The man in our record did not do nothing. He did not hide at the edge of a quiet town and feed a cat and wait for days to pass. Grant was quiet for longer this time. A bird landed on the fence post behind Rael and then flew off again. The afternoon light was long and yellow across the packed earth. Somewhere down the road someone was chopping wood, the sound carrying clean and sharp through the still air. I got tired, Grant said. That is not all of it, Rael said. He looked at her. She looked back. Her eyes were steady and patient and there was no judgment in them. Just waiting. The kind of waiting that says it will wait as long as it needs to. Grant set his tea down. He reached for his left sleeve and pushed it up slowly, past the elbow, to the middle of his upper arm. He turned his arm so the inside faced up and held it toward the light. The mark was not a scar. It was not a brand. It was something between the two, a shape pressed into the skin in dark ink that had gone slightly blue with age. It was not large. But it was exact. Clean lines that formed something between a symbol and a sigil, the kind of mark that took skill and purpose to make and was not made for decoration. Rael went very still. She leaned forward slowly and looked at the mark without blinking. Then she looked at Grant's face. Then back at the mark. That is a bridge seal, she said quietly. Yes, Grant said. Those were given to 7 people, she said. 7 humans. At the end of the Hollow War. Before the program was buried. 6, Grant said. 1 did not make it to the end. Rael was silent for a long moment. The smaller drake made a very soft sound, almost too low to hear. We were told they were all gone, Rael said. The elders said the bridge seals died with the program. That there was no one left. That was the point, Grant said. He pulled his sleeve back down. They hid us. The ones who survived. Changed our names, moved us to places no one would look. Said it was for our protection. He picked up his tea. Maybe it was. For a while. And now? Rael said. Grant looked at her over the rim of the cup. Now you are sitting in my backyard, he said. And I do not think you came this far just because you were hurt. Rael held his gaze. No, she said. We did not. The wind moved through the yard, slow and easy. The cat appeared from under the porch and sat at the edge of the canvas, watching Rael with its steady yellow eyes. Grant finished his tea. He set the cup down and folded his hands and waited for her to tell him the rest. Rael told him everything. She did not rush. She spoke in the same low, careful way she had spoken before, choosing each word with patience, making sure he understood each part before she moved to the next. The afternoon light shifted slowly across the yard while she talked. Grant sat on his stool with his hands folded and his eyes on her and he did not interrupt once. It had started 3 months ago. A settlement on the northern edge of Drake territory had been found empty. Not attacked. Not burned. Just empty. Every Drake in it gone, as if they had simply walked away in the night. The elders sent scouts. The scouts found tracks leading into the deep forest and then nothing. No bodies. No signs of fighting. Just silence where there had been a living settlement the week before. Then it happened again. A smaller group, further east. Gone the same way. The elders were old enough to remember the Hollow War. When the third settlement went empty they called a closed council and spoke a name that most of the younger Drakes had never heard. They spoke it quietly, the way people speak the name of something they hoped was finished. Grant knew the name. He did not say it out loud. He just nodded slowly and let Rail continue. The thing that had driven the Hollow War was not an army. It was not a weapon. It was a presence. Something old that had been pushed back into the deep places of the world at the end of the war and sealed there, not destroyed, because no one had known how to destroy it. The sealing had taken everything the bridge program had. Every bridge seal used in the final act of the war had left a mark on the person who carried it, a cost, a piece of something given and not returned. The 6 who survived had carried that cost quietly ever since. Grant looked down at his left arm without rolling up the sleeve. The seals were not just marks, Rail said. The elders believe they were also keys. The thing in the deep place has been pressing against the seal from the inside for a long time. It found a way to pull on the connection. To reach through. She paused. We believe it is using that connection to draw drakes toward it. The ones going missing are not being taken. They are being called. And they are answering, Grant said. Yes. He was quiet for a moment. How many so far? Enough to worry the elders greatly, Rail said. Too many to ignore. Grant stood up from the stool. He did not pace. He just stood, with his hands at his sides, looking at the ground for a moment the way a man looks when he is measuring something heavy against something he already decided a long time ago. The elder sent you to find me, he said. He sent us to find whoever was left, Rail said. We did not know if you were still alive. The records gave us a location that was 10 years old. We tracked from there. She glanced at the smaller drake, who had been listening without moving. Dusk found the trail. She is better at it than most. Dusk lowered her head slightly. It was a small movement but it was deliberate. Grant looked at her. How is the wing? Better, Dusk said. Her voice was quieter than Rail's, lower and rougher, but the words were clear. Grant nodded. He looked at them both for a long moment. Then he turned and walked into the house. He was inside for a few minutes. When he came back out he was carrying a flat wooden box, old and dark with age, with a simple iron clasp on the front. He set it on the crate and opened it. Inside were things that did not belong in a quiet house at the edge of a quiet town. A folded document with a seal pressed into the bottom corner that had not been used in over 20 years. A small compass with markings on its face that were not standard. A narrow knife in a plain sheath. A bundle of cord tied in a specific way. And beneath all of it, wrapped in waxed cloth, something flat and heavy that he did not take out yet. Rail looked at the box. She did not say anything. Grant closed the clasp and tucked the box under his arm. He went back inside. He came out with a travel pack, old but well kept, and began moving through the shed with a quiet efficiency, pulling things from shelves and checking them and placing them in the pack. Medicines. Cloth. The tools from the crate. He worked fast but without hurry, the way a man works when he has done this before and his hands remember the order of it without being told. You are not going to argue, Rail said. It was not quite a question. No, Grant said. You are not going to ask for time. No. She watched him for a moment. Most people would. Grant pulled the pack closed and set it beside the box. He looked at Rail. I have had a long time to think about what I would do if this day came, he said. I thought about it for years. I made peace with it a long time ago. He glanced at the house, at the small window and the worn front step and the cat who had come back out and was sitting on the porch watching everything. This was never really where I was going to end up. I think I always knew that. He picked up the pack and the box. Can you both travel tomorrow morning, he said. Or do you need another day? Rail looked at Dusk. Dusk stood up slowly, tested the wrapped leg, and put her full weight on it. Tomorrow, Dusk said. Grant nodded. He set the pack inside the door and came back out and sat on his stool. He poured the last of the cold tea and drank it. The sun was going down again over Millford. The sky was wide and orange and very still. Grant looked at it for a while. Then he went inside to get ready. They left Millford before sunrise. Grant locked the house without looking back at it for long. He left water out for the cat and a piece of dried meat on the porch step. The cat sat beside it and watched him shoulder his pack. He gave her one slow pat on the head. Then he walked around the back and the three of them moved out through the field behind the shed, into the dark, before the town woke up. Nobody saw them go. The journey to the highland took 4 days. They moved through forest and open grassland and then up into the rocky foothills where the air thinned and the trees grew shorter and further apart. Grant kept pace without complaint. He was older than he had been the last time he walked this kind of ground, but his legs remembered it. Rail and Dusk moved beside him, not ahead, matching his pace without being asked. They did not talk much on the road. There was not much that needed saying yet. At night Grant made small fires and they rested close together for warmth. Once, on the third night, Dusk spoke quietly about the settlement that had gone empty first. She had known someone there. She did not say much about it. Grant listened and said he was sorry. Dusk was quiet after that, but some of the tightness went out of her shoulders. On the fourth morning they crested a long ridge and the highland opened up before them. Grant had seen it once before, a very long time ago. It had not changed. Wide flat stone stretched out across the top of the world, broken here and there by deep cracks and old formations of dark rock. The sky above it was enormous. The wind came across it with nothing to slow it down. And gathered on that stone, in a wide circle around a flat central platform, were the drakes. There were more than Grant had expected. He had thought dozens. It was more than that. They ranged from young adults to ancients so old their scales had gone pale and their movements were slow and deliberate. They were all watching the ridge. They had been waiting. Grant walked down toward the circle without stopping. He heard the low sound that moved through the gathered drakes as he approached. Not alarm. Something else. Something like recognition. Like a name being passed from one to the next in a language that did not use words. The circle opened for him. He walked through and stepped onto the flat central platform and stopped. He was one human standing among more ancient creatures than most people ever saw in a lifetime. The wind pulled at his coat. He stood straight and kept his eyes on the largest drake at the far edge of the circle. The elder was vast. Pale-scaled and slow-eyed, with a stillness that came from something much deeper than calm. He looked at Grant for a long moment. Then he lowered his head. It was a small movement. But every drake in the circle saw it. Nobody challenged Grant. Nobody questioned why he was there. The elder spoke first. His voice was deep and unhurried. He said Grant's old name. Not the name he had used in Millford. The name from before. The name that was in the records. Grant answered to it without hesitation. He opened his pack and took out the flat wrapped item from the wooden box. He unwrapped the waxed cloth slowly and held up what was inside. It was a map, hand-drawn on heavy material, marked in both human script and drake notation. He had made it himself during the final months of the Hollow War. It showed the location of the sealed place, the paths that led to it, and the 6 points around it where the ceiling had been anchored. He laid it flat on the stone platform and knelt beside it. He spoke clearly and without rushing. He explained what he believed was happening, how the presence in the sealed place was pulling on the bridge seal connections, how it was calling drakes toward it the way a current pulls things downstream. He explained that fighting it directly would not work. It had no body to fight. What held it was the seal, and the seal was weakening because the anchoring points had not been maintained in over 20 years. The solution was not a battle. It was a repair. Each anchoring point needed to be reached and reinforced. 3 of them were inside drake territory. Two were in the deep forest. One was in a place no Drake could reach alone because it sat inside a human settlement that had been built over it without anyone knowing what was underneath. Grant said he could get into that settlement. He knew how. He knew who to speak to and what to say and how to move through human spaces without raising alarm. No Drake could do that. But he could not reach the other 5 points without Drake guides who knew the deep territory. Neither could work without the other. He looked up at the elder. The elder looked at the map for a long time. Then he looked at the circle of drakes around him. Something passed between them, slow and wordless. One by one the ancients lowered their heads. The council had agreed. Grant stood up. He rewrapped the map and put it away and turned to find Rail and Dusk standing just inside the circle behind him. He had not heard them come in. Rail looked at him with those steady focused eyes. Dusk had her head slightly raised and for the first time since he had met her she looked like something other than a creature in pain. She looked ready. They walked together to the edge of the highland cliffs as the first light of dawn came up over the far mountains. The sky went from black to deep blue to a pale and burning gold. The wind was cold and clean and it came straight off the open world below. Grant stood between them and looked out at all of it. No more quiet mornings with cold tea. No more fence and shed and cat and empty days. No more hiding at the edge of a town that did not know his name. He was not afraid. He was exactly where he had always been pointed. He had just taken a long time getting back to it. The sun came fully up. The three of them stood in its light for a moment longer. Then they turned and walked back toward the council to begin.